This is what it is to give without expectation of receiving anything in return. This is what it means to pay it forward. This is what it means to be in the nonprofit sector, to make good things happen for a better world. And it happens one kindness at a time.
Welcome to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast, brought to you by DonorSearch, the show that takes you inside the lives of thought leaders, innovators, and change makers in fundraising, philanthropy, and civil society. I'm your host, Jay Frost. Today, we speak with Jennifer Li Dotson, a veteran fundraising leader whose extraordinary work in philanthropy is only eclipsed by a personal journey that has taken her from an emergency landing in Hawaii to a near-death experience on Mount Everest and virtually everywhere else in between. In our conversation, she recounts the many volunteers, teachers, friends, mentors, and organizations who have helped and inspired her over the years and inspired her to do the same for others today. We begin our conversation talking about her return from a celebration of life. So first, let me ask you about this.
Oh, yes. So I just ran back to the house to sit down and talk with you, Jay. And I came from a celebration of life. So a little bit of a sad situation for a family friend. And I was happy to be here to take part with my family and all of our friends to celebrate a very beautiful person and say goodbye and give hugs and all those good things. But one of the things that we do here in Hawaii is we celebrate with flower. And so if it's your birthday, if it's your graduation from high school or graduation from college, or if it's a celebration of life, we celebrate with flower. And it's one of the ways we express ourselves. And it is very symbolic. The lepo'o, as you see here that I'm wearing, a crown of flowers on the top of my head, also known as a hakule, is something that takes quite a bit of work to make. So a labor of love, and it is an art to know how to weave the flowers so that they will stay together, that they sometimes the flowers that you select are representative or symbolic of certain things in our life. So by asking about this, I'm actually very happy to share that this is just one way that we express our love, our aloha spirit, and you see it everywhere in Hawaii. So let's just say, for example, we were at a meeting together. We were at a fundraising meeting together, and I walk in with a lei or a haku or a lepo'o. You might ask, is it your birthday? And I would answer back, actually, yes, it's my birthday. Or actually, I came from a celebration of life, like I just did. And it's a conversation starter. It's something that I actually want you to ask about. And so I'm glad you did. And it happens all the time in Hawaii. Just the other day, I was in the elevator and somebody stepped in with a lei, wearing a lei. And I said, it's your birthday? And they said, yes, it's my birthday. And we all sang happy birthday. Everybody in the elevator started singing happy birthday to the church. And it is totally normal. It's like one of the things I love about Hawaii and our culture and the way we find time to celebrate everything, the ups, the downs, the happy, the sad, but mostly the happy.
So you selected these flowers yourself?
Actually, it was friends of ours. They had made the hakule, the lepo'o, and we are all wearing it. We all wore it during this ceremony and during the reception. And I'll probably wear it for the rest of the day too. it's just something that we do here in Hawaii. And the funny thing is, here I am sitting with my headsets in and my lepo'o on top of it. Um, and I just feel like this is the most normal thing that could have ever like happened. Like here I am talking with Jay Frost with my haku and my Bluetooth headsets, and here we are doing our conversation. Like it was, like it's a Monday. It's like it's a Monday after Thanksgiving, like it's a Monday before Giving Tuesday. We're wearing our hakule.
This sounds like something you've known for your whole life.
Yes, I'm born and raised in Hawaii. I was made in Vietnam. And my mom, very, very pregnant, didn't quite make it over the Pacific Ocean, and the plane had to make an emergency landing in Hawaii. And here I am, born and raised in Hawaii. I always tell her, I said, Mom, thank you for giving birth in Hawaii, because you could have given birth anywhere else. I actually to this day, I don't know where that plane was headed. Maybe California, maybe Oklahoma, maybe Kansas. I have no idea, but I told my mom, thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving birth to me in Hawaii. And she says, actually, no, thank you. Thank you for telling the world that you had to come out at that point in time over the airspace of Hawaii. So here I am. Yeah.
Wow. So an emergency landing.
Emergency landing.
And so once born there, your family stayed. You and your mother stayed forever.
Yeah. So my family unfortunately had to leave, the war-torn country of Vietnam during the fall of Saigon, and in many respects, very fortunate to have the family stay together and stay in Hawaii, where I know from talking with many of my peers, many other families that have had to leave Vietnam during the war, families were separated, and some, had a very difficult time in reunification. But our family in Hawaii, we were fortunate to be together. Now, when my mom, my dad, they landed, didn't speak the language, didn't have jobs, didn't have housing. My mom tells me actually that my first bassinet, my first little baby crib, was the top drawer of a dresser drawer. And so they had just put like some blankets to make it a little soft. And that was my bassinet. So from, very, very humble beginnings. And what happened as I grew up, my mother, my father, my maternal grandmother, we say popo in Chinese. So my first language is Cantonese Chinese, my popo. They always told me that there were hundreds of nameless, faceless people, volunteers, maybe, we don't know, who helped us, helped my family, helped my mom fill out an application for housing, helped my dad fill out an application for his first job, helped my family with food and clothing, helped me with little baby clothes and baby food, formula and baby bottles. Hundreds of people. We'll never know who they are, because it's not like they issued us, paperwork that said you owe us back for all of this help that you received. So I was always instilled from a very young age that there is a debt that our family can never repay from all these people that have helped us without expecting anything in return. And I think that's how I honestly learned philanthropy, by experiencing it firsthand and by also hearing about it from my parents. These are people that never expected anything in return by helping our family. Otherwise, they would have like maybe written their name and said, and by the way, when you can pay us back the $100, please do so as soon as possible. But they never did. I don't know to this day who these people are. And so my maternal grandmother, who never spoke English, would take me every week to the temple to volunteer. And we would make food and serve food. Most of the time, I would eat the food because I was always hungry as a child. Actually, I'm always hungry to this day. I love to eat. I love to eat. So we would volunteer. My mom, my dad, always, whenever there was an opportunity to volunteer or lend a hand, we were always there to sign up, to be, there first in line to help out where we could, because we didn't have a lot of money, right? We didn't have a lot of money to give back and pay back, but we knew that this was like something that we needed to do, but could do as well. So I really feel like that's how I first learned about philanthropy from a very young age. And whoever you are out there, I don't know who you are, but thank you. Thank you for what you do. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today without your help. So you're out there. I know you are. And one day I'll meet you. Actually, I do have a story about that. I did meet one person who did have an influence me. I don't know if we'll get there, but if you're interested, maybe we could tell that story. Really?
Yeah, please, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So I went to a little local preschool, right? Nothing too interesting about it. But in this preschool, I didn't speak English. And so I always had a hard time communicating with other little kids, teachers, and things like that. And let's just say I would lash out in my frustration as a young child. And I would hit, and I'd swing my little fist. I was just so angry all the time. So I would cry a lot. And during nap time, I would stage my protest by not napping. You could possibly say that this is a totally normal little kid thing to do, but I don't know what was going through my little brain. I saw all the other little kids napping at preschool, and it was a huge open area, right? It was a huge open area, and every little child had a little mat. Just be there, just like wreaking havoc. I go and I would make as much noise as possible with the wooden blocks, and I would get into the other toys and fling them around. And so the teachers, one teacher in particular, was always very patient with me. And instead of like scolding me and putting me in timeout or punishing me, she would channel my angry energy into something positive. So she would take me aside, and while everyone napped, she would teach me English. And so we went through the alphabet. We went through, simple things, A is for apple, B is for banana, C is for cherry. I actually don't know, but I got one-on-one time, special one-on-one time with this teacher. And I can't tell you, but I know how I felt as a child to get that special one-on-one time. I felt like I was the center of the universe. And I went from being like this angry, hitting, fighting, noisy child to a child who just like, I loved going to school and I love nap time because everybody else went to sleep and I got my special one-on-one time. So fast forward to when I worked for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And one of my first, nonprofit jobs, I started volunteering for MDA, and then I became an employee for MDA. But one of the first projects that I had. It was a special project that MDA had called Hopathon. And the Hopathon was a fundraiser, but it was also an educational program to teach young children about acceptance of other young children that had disabilities. We knew in the work that we were doing with neuromuscular diseases that some children, uh, their disease progressed faster, and they were being fitted for wheelchairs, well, leg braces, walkers, and even wheelchairs at the age of 4 or 5, preschool level. And so one of the things that inevitably happens, when a child is different, they get teased, right? And you're nodding like this, right? I think this is, everyone has experienced this in some way, shape, or form. And so I had the special, wonderful job to roll this Hopathon program out throughout the state of Hawaii. And I love this program so much because I loved being back in that preschool environment that gave me so much joy, because I remembered loving going to preschool and having my special one-on-one time. And I feel like preschool teachers have that magical ability to create that wonderful love for education at such an early age. So in doing my job, I wanted to be the best at my job. And so I said to myself, I think I could really use some extra training and education on how to deliver this program to preschool age children by taking some extra classes in early education. So the community college had, some continuing education, and I signed up. And here I was back in my adult, back in the classroom again. And my first day, I had my pen and my notebook. I was ready. I was sitting in the front row because I was back in school. I love school. And I had, my folders all nicely labeled. There is something special about going back to school as an adult, right? You just have this maturity level. You're like super organized. And I'm sitting there waiting for the lesson to start or the lecturer to walk in, and the door opens. And Jay, I kid you not, it was like a lightning bolt hit me. I was immediately transported back to my 5-year-old self, because in through that college classroom door walked my preschool teacher. And how did I know it was my preschool teacher? I hadn't seen her since I was like 5 years old, right? She always wore her hair in a very long single braid down her back. And it was really long. I mean, it wasn't just, down past her shoulders. No, it was really long, almost down to her ankles long. And here she is. Now, the hair was not jet black anymore. It was salt and pepper, but it was still that single braid. And she walked in, and I'm staring at her, right, with my bug eyes. Speechless, with my pen and my paper. Probably she's like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with this person? She looks at me and she's like, Jennifer? And I'm just like, what? She's like, you look the same. She remembered me, Jay. Maybe because I was such a troublemaker. Maybe I was such a troublemaker. That's why she remembered me. But I'm almost crying telling you this story, because that's the kind of impact that a human being can have on another human being. Here she was like, okay, I'm not going to tell you how old I was at the time, maybe 30 years old. So 30 years later, still dedicating her life work, her time, her energy to doing what she did best in early education. I found out later, because I mean, she became my professor. I found out later that, yeah, not only was she a preschool teacher, but she was a professor of early education so that she could teach other preschool teachers to be preschool teachers. It's just like amazing. It really is. I mean, the full circle of what we do. And I feel like we get to experience that firsthand every day in our nonprofit work. And we're so blessed and so lucky and fortunate to have that. There's no other job. There's nothing else that anyone can do for their profession or their work except to see that full circle come around and around so many times.
But
And I have so many
also,
stories like that.
that's
Yeah.
also a choice,
Yeah.
though. I mean, it's a choice you
Yes.
made. And
Yes.
so that you had that early experience that was so formative for you. Obviously,
Yeah.
your family made its commitment. That was important to you. And then you had that experience, which helped to shape you. But later, it sounds like a lot of first generation families that I know, people go off in different directions, but you came back to this work. But first you went, I mean, you were a Punahou grad, right? And then you went to Georgetown and then the LSE. So I don't know the sequence exactly, but that sounds like a track to become, I don't know, a business person, an economist, not necessarily to go back and, be the Muscular Dystrophy Association. So how did you go from that young child who was trying to figure out where she fit to, this woman who went out into the world and then returned to Hawaii?
Yeah. So I do have to say, I giggle when you say Punahou School because this is something that, here in Hawaii, there's an intense rivalry, right, of high schools. And when you ask people, so where are you from? We usually we're usually referring to like what high school you went to. It's not like I would meet Jay Frost and be like, hi, Jay, what high school did you go to? It's a very Hawaii thing, just like wearing this hakule, just lepo'o is a very Hawaii thing. But even on the mainland, when you meet other people from Hawaii and you're like, where are you from? We usually are referring to, our high school. And more often than not, I say, oh, I'm from Punahou, the same school that President Obama graduated from. Pause.
But not at the same time.
Not at the same time. Thank you. So, so here's an interesting thing. So the year I was graduating senior at Punahou School, my dearest teacher, my mentor, my favorite teacher, who also then became my mentor even after I graduated, Doc Berry. Doc Berry had this amazing idea. I felt it was amazing. It was quite controversial at the time. Had this amazing idea that every Punahou student that graduated shall graduate with a requirement to perform community service. And our senior year was the first year that they were going to roll this program out. Now, why was it controversial, right? We're a K through 12 prep school, and a lot was riding on where everybody was going to go to college. It's something that we take quite a bit of pride in. And to roll out something, so dramatic, our senior year ruffled a lot of feathers. Now, I was like, this is the greatest idea, Doc Berry. And so I immediately opened the paper, back then, right? Jay, you know this. We opened the paper to the classified ad section. And there was a help wanted, right? Help wanted, right? And there was an ad that I found for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Um, you, you see how this connects? It was a graduation requirement, Jay. And I'm like, I got my pen and I circled help wanted, Muscular Dystrophy Association, called the number. They said, great, come in, fill out the application, interview, and volunteer. That was my first interaction with the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And I have to say, unequivocally, to this day, I have seen a lot of different volunteer programs, many of them good, some of them bad. But Muscular Dystrophy Association, from way back in the day, from when I was a young high school student, had an amazing volunteer intake program and volunteer training program and volunteer management program. And I see to this day that there are some organizations that struggle with those different pieces, right? Volunteer intake, volunteer training. Who has the time to train these volunteers? They're only going to be with us for a week or two. Some of them are only one-off volunteers. So who has the time for this? And then volunteer management. MDA, kudos to you for all those years ago, making such a great impression on me. I became a volunteer. I stuck with it from when I was 16 years old as a volunteer to the point where I became an employee. And to this day, still donate. I still donate to MDA because it is something so near and dear to my heart. And as fundraisers, we speak a lot about the interconnectedness between volunteering and philanthropy. Some of our best donors come to us because they are first giving to our organization with their time and their talent, and then they are growing their giving through actual financial gifts. I have to say, without a doubt, I think the Muscular Dystrophy Association does it the best. And I mean, continuously from when I was 16 years old, I have never missed an opportunity to either volunteer or give to that organization.
And then you were there at Idaho, you were finishing that, but then you decided
to leave. I never finished my story.
Well, no. Then you went across the country. I mean, you left,
I graduated.
Why did you? I mean, you live in one of the most wonderful places in the world. Let's just be frank about that. It is not only a place that welcomed you, but it seems like the spirit of aloha welcomes everyone. At least it feels that way. Yeah. So, but then you left.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Why did you leave?
Yeah. So, okay. So I good news is I completed my community service requirement and I graduated. But in the application process, here's another funny story. It's not exactly a story that like maybe many would be proud of, but I'm just going to tell it to you anyway, because it's so darn funny. Maybe it's a lesson in like, you never know what'll happen to you, but a lot of things have happened to me, possibly because I'm not the smartest person in the room, but maybe I'm just blessed and fortunate. So I am attending this, K through 12 prep school. And there's a lot of emphasis and there's a lot of stress placed on students, like where you're going to go to school and you have to go to the best school. And so we have college counselors, right? We have an actual like requirement that we have to spend time every week leading up to our our college application and selection, meeting with a counselor to make sure that we're staying on track. And so on my appointment date and time, I like totally forgot. I totally spaced. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know. Maybe there was too much sun that day in Hawaii, and I like baked my brain. I don't know. I was just being a typical teenager, like talking with my friends, and I looked down and oh my gosh, I'm late for my college counseling appointment, and I'm running to the office, and outside of the college counselor's office, there's racks, right? Rows and rows, racks of brochures. And they're, mostly for display. But here I am running very late to my appointment, and I grab 3 or 4 brochures, whichever one looked good, right? One of them had a very nice picture on the front. So kudos to every marketing person out there. Marketing matters. Marketing matters when you're a high school student applying for university and you're late to your appointment. So I grabbed 3 or 4 of my brochures and I plopped them down on the college counselor's desk. And I said, here are the 3 colleges I will apply to, right? My declaration. I am so prepared. You had no idea I was late. So the college counselor peers down at these 3 brochures and takes one and says, takes the other and takes the third one and goes, well, we can throw this one in the trash because you're not getting into this school. Proceeds to then put it in the trash. And I was like, what? Reached over and grabbed it out of the trash can. I'm like, wait a minute. This one happens to be my favorite university. I think we have this like troublemaker, maybe like theme going on here. So, I mean, I was totally making that up. I mean, I was late for my appointment, and it was because somebody told me no. I was like dug in my heels, and I was like, no, that's the one I want to go to. And the college counselor said, good luck with that. And I said, great. Thank you very much. Are we done here? I mean, gosh, I will say that I hope my daughter never sees this video, Jay, because number one, that's like really bad behavior. That's just rude. Like, I don't want her to know. I don't want her to know that I applied to someplace because number one, the picture was nice on the brochure, and number 2, somebody told me I couldn't go there. I don't know. Maybe that is a good story. Needless to say, I went home that night. I filled in the application and turned it in. And it was for Georgetown University. And it was early decision. I had no idea what early decision was at the time. I had no idea. I had no idea that it was early decision binding, by the way. And so I got in December. That was the only school I applied to. Because that's the rules, right? That's the rules. Once you apply to an early decision binding school, you got to go. Can you imagine if it was any other?
What'd your guidance counselor have to say?
Okay. All right. So here's the end of the story. So I put on the Georgetown University sweater. I have it to this date. My daughter is actually wearing it. Like, she thinks it's the best sweater. It's like this gray Georgetown sweater with like black print across the front in huge letters. This is Georgetown. So I wore it to school the day after I got my acceptance letter, and I marched myself into the college counselor's office, and I said, told you so. He looks up from his desk and goes, excuse me? He didn't remember. There were 400 students in my graduating class. Okay. It was like, congratulations. What a letdown, man. I mean, like, I was like hoping to have like some vindication, like, oh my gosh, you were right. I should have believed in you from the start. Go get him, Jennifer.
Maybe that was his
And
technique.
yeah.
Drop one in the trash, and that's the one they all go to.
No, now that I have a 14-year-old daughter, I'm beginning to think you're right, Jay, because anytime I'm like looking over my shoulder and whispering because is she around? Is she listening to me? Anytime that I expressed any sort of interest in something that she does, it's like immediate, like opposite, right? She does the opposite. So yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, maybe that college counselor really knew their stuff.
Right. Well, the next time you say that Georgetown sweatshirt isn't for you, you'll know.
Yeah. I should say something like, daughter, I really don't think Harvard is for you. I don't think you'll get in.
All right. So you went to Georgetown. You went to LSE. Did that go sequentially? Did you go right from one to the other? What?
Yeah, well, so what
That's
happened?
London for those who aren't paying attention.
I didn't even know where it was.
So
okay, no, I
moving.
Yeah, and so the early decision binding program that I was accepted to was the School of Foreign Service. So for all intents and purposes, yeah. It's a pre-vocational school, right? And so, oh my gosh, if I have any advice for, the graduating seniors, don't take 12 AP classes like Jennifer did, because I killed myself and took all AP courses thinking I was going to graduate in 2 years or less, right? Well, with Georgetown and their pre-vocational program, no AP courses count because you must follow their educational track. I didn't know that. Dang it. 2020 hindsight. Well, so I went to Georgetown and I was very blessed, very fortunate to have many amazing professors. Don't get me wrong. Some professors that I'm still in contact with to today because they've been such mentors to me and great influencers of my educational career. So one of the professors I had the great fortune of studying under Professor Madeleine Albright. And so studying under Professor Madeleine Albright, she was such a trailblazer. She really, she was so ahead of her time. And
This was after her service as secretary.
Prior.
Okay.
Prior. Now I'm dating myself. Now people are going to Google what year did Madeleine Albright become the first female Secretary of State? First female Secretary of State.
Yeah.
My gosh, this was my professor. And this is a professor who really looked out for us.
Right.
She knew in her mind that so the Foreign Service was very much still dominated, right, by males. And, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, access so much nowadays. But back then, Professor Albright was writing the book on DEIA before it even existed. At least that is how I feel. And she really made it a point to encourage us, females, people of color, to stick to the plan, and take the Foreign Service exam and enter into public service. Well, the year I graduated, again, everybody's going to Google this. What year was there the government shut down? what year was there a hiring freeze in the Department of State? That was the year I graduated. When the economy crashed and there was a full hiring freeze in the Department of State. So my graduating class, many of them ended up working on Wall Street. Jay, I could have been retired by age 30 if I worked on Wall Street like many of my classmates.
But what fun is that?
So, I had taken the Foreign Service exam a year early, just by accident, totally by accident. Again, not smart, just lucky. And so I ended up joining the Foreign Service, but one of very few folks from my graduating class that did so, just because of circumstances, right? I mean, the government wasn't hiring, and the State Department definitely had, a hiring freeze, indefinite, right? We had no idea how long. So you graduate, you got to get a job, and so I ended up having the good fortune to work in Hong Kong. Cantonese is my native language, my mother tongue. And I was also there prior to the handover. And so amazing milestone moment. Now everybody's Googling, what year was the Hong Kong handover? I guess hopefully I don't look as old as I seem. It's a good filter. Hopefully we have a good Zoom filter today. Good lighting, good Zoom filter always helps with that. But in any case, what an amazing experience, because I was able to work and experience living abroad, living internationally, living and working in a place that my father grew up. He is originally from Hong Kong, and before the handover as well, which was just this massive geopolitical milestone. I mean, all eyes in the world was on Hong Kong, and I was there for it. So yeah, after the Hong Kong handover, U.S. government wanted to retain, smartly so, our strong positive relationship with our Western European counterparts. And so I was part of a team that then was selected to go to London, and I worked at the London Embassy after the handover. And so I had the good fortune to also work at the London Embassy. This was the London Embassy in Mayfair. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. Beautiful London Embassy when it was still located in Mayfair. And I also attended classes at the London School of Economics. So what an amazing time to be a young woman working in these geopolitical spheres of influence. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Now you were there, but then didn't you relocate to New York, or did you go to Hawaii? What?
Yeah. I was engaged to be married. And unfortunately, I lost my fiance in the 9/11 attacks. And that experience left me brokenhearted, and also brought me into contact with the volunteers and the amazing team of the American Red Cross at the Family Reunification Center. And so what I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately, is that being engaged to be married does not count as next of kin. And so being there, searching for an answer, I felt very out of place, But it really was, it was the volunteers, the compassion and the caring and the deep just love that these volunteers were extending to people like me that, I mean, it was everything I could do just to get out of bed, every day. And crying every day and not knowing. And I mean, just like, what do you do? How do you even begin, And it was the volunteers of the American Red Cross that always welcomed me. Finally, they gave me like a job. So this is another, like, I don't know, this is another funny thing about our nonprofit sector is like, you hang around enough, you hang around enough,
they'll give you something to do.
You a job. Yeah. They'll give you something to do. Like, hey. And so, yeah, I worked at the Family Reunification Center as a volunteer. And a lot of times people like me would come in and they would be searching and they would scribble a name on a piece of paper. And I would take these pieces of paper and I would like hold on to them and I would like try, I like would file them, not really, but I'm going to tell you what I did. So I had like tons and tons, like dozens and hundreds of these little papers. Like sometimes people would just like literally like just tear off a piece of paper, right? Or find something like crumpled napkin and write, can you please help me, right? And I would take all, and so I started to tape them onto the wall. And I would, sometimes I would find a name, a duplicate, as we say in our database language. I would find a duplicate and then I would take that name and put it next to each other. And then, and I would, find patterns. Sometimes there were, phone numbers. So I would start to group them. This was my rudimentary database. And from there, I started to actually inputting names and numbers into a database and grouping them and forming queries, right? As we say in our database language, all my data nerds out there, I love you. Because data is power, data is knowledge. And so I would start to create queries, right? And pull reports. And I'll tell you, I started working as a volunteer for the American Red Cross, and then I became an employee. So now 2 times I started as a volunteer for an organization and then became an employee for them. So there you have it. But maybe that's the good that comes from the bad, or the silver lining that comes from the dark clouds. So that's my current bad story.
You were working with them in Hawaii. So did you go?
Yeah, well, that was many years later. No, that was many years later. I came back to Hawaii. A sad and broken person, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. I wanted to just like cry all day long. And, my mom sort of kicked me in the butt and said, I'm tired of you just like crying your eyes out. Go do something, go volunteer or something. So I started volunteering again. Volunteering actually helped save my life because it literally gave me something to do. I felt like maybe what a failure, right? This like amazing international career, his trajectory. And you're not the first person to ask, right? You're like, well, what if you stuck with it? Do you think you could have been ambassador by now? And I'm like, I don't know. Like maybe, who knows? But that wasn't in the cards for me, right? That wasn't in the cards for me. I came back to Hawaii a broken person, crying every day, not wanting to get out of bed every day. But volunteering helped get me out of bed, helped give me something to do. So
you began this conversation talking about the celebration of life. And I know that at that time, people were still looking, like you were looking for their loved ones. It was a long time coming before they could do that there in New York. But what was it like returning to Hawaii? Because it sounds like the kind of community where people are there for you when you're ready.
Yeah. It was awkward for me. Like, I didn't want to have to explain to everybody. Like, I didn't even want to go to the grocery store because I would have to explain to people. I didn't want to go outdoors just in case I bump into some. And in Hawaii, inevitably, you're going to bump into like 10 people, whether it's your neighbors or your mom's friends or, what have you. But it was very awkward and I had a hard time, coming back to Hawaii and finding myself again, finding my place in the world again. But I think looking back, volunteering and the nonprofit sector gave me that purpose in life and gave me that thing bigger than myself so that I didn't have to explain maybe my personal circumstance. I could just talk about what I was doing, what I was volunteering for, or the organization that I was supporting, right? And I think that's what many of us find true in the work that we do in philanthropy.
You didn't talk at all about being an athlete in your young life, so I don't know if you were. But one of the things that's remarkable about everything you just said is that you went from probably being understandably, just rolled up and not ready to visit the world for a bit, despite your mother's wishes that you do so, to volunteering and finding, refinding and remaking your place in the world, but then climbing Mount Everest. So how in the world did that happen?
Yeah. Well, so I did tell you that I didn't speak English as a first language, so I had to learn English. So my first language is actually, let's see. My first language is Cantonese. My second language was not English. I tell people that my second language, my first learned language is sports. And the reason why as a young child is, people are like talking to you and all you see is like mouth moving and you're like, what is this person trying? And they're like pointing and they're like gesturing. Well, so in sports, as a young child, soccer, there's a ball and everybody's like pointing and kicking and you're like, got it. Ball that way, winning, right? That was my language. Super simple to understand, super simple to follow. And so I've always loved sports. And so I love running. I love soccer. I love baseball. I love softball.
But it's one thing to do these sports. It's another to do Ironman there in Hawaii. It's another thing to climb Mount Everest. So how did you decide this is the moment I'm going to do those things? And how in the world did you accomplish?
Yeah. So I had a marathon group, a group of friends, and when we lived together, we'd always run marathons together, and that was like so much fun. Oh, so much fun. Right. And eventually, you know, as young people do, you move away. And so we always said to each other, no matter where in the world we're living, once a year, we will meet for a marathon together, just like old times. And so this marathon group, we would meet and we ran all the greatest marathons. I mean, it was a great way to also see the world. And it was always one person's turn, the next person's turn to choose where we would run the next marathon. And so one year, one of the gals, she says, well, we are going to run this year. Ha ha ha. Mount Everest. And we're like, huh? I didn't know they had a marathon. And she's like, they don't, but we're going to do it. So, so that literally is how we all gathered. Um, uh, and we met in Kathmandu, Nepal to start our marathon. There was no marathon, Jay. There was literally like, it was one person's idea that the year we were going to meet up, we were going to climb Mount Everest together. And I almost died.
What?
Yeah. I mean, like, you can't train for a 18,000 climb up a mountain at sea level.
No.
No,
So what happened?
oh, what happened was I almost died. I literally almost died. So, you arrive in, you know, in Kathmandu, and it's all very exciting, right? Everybody who is either starting their trek or ending their trek is in Kathmandu. And so maybe it was just the excitement of it all at first. I didn't realize that I was already at altitude and kind of already starting to feel sick. And again, I am born and raised at sea level, so this is nothing I could have ever anticipated. No, but perhaps if I was smarter, again, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but perhaps if I was smarter, I would have known these things, but I didn't. And so, so the first day of our trek, we arrive in Lukla, which is a tiny little town, right? I mean, it's just basically day one. And at Lukla, you're already at altitude. And I was stumbling around like a drunk person. And again, a lot of young people, right? A lot of young people. They just chalked it up to, I guess she had a rough night last night. They probably thought I was hungover or something. And I was like, my vision was blurred. I was sick to my stomach. I was stumbling because my balance was off. And the group I was with, just like, right? I mean, we're all in very good shape, but nothing could have prepared me for this. So I was so far behind that it was kind of annoying to the rest of the group. And the harder I tried, the harder I struggled to catch up the group, the sicker I became, to the point where I was literally like crawling on my hands and knees. And one of the locals, one of the Sherpas actually looked at me and kind of mentioned, I think she's altitude sick. And everybody laughed. They're like, nobody gets altitude sickness. Like, this is nothing, right? This is like day one of the trek, lady. And so he broke me off from the rest of the group. And I was like, no, I need to stay with my friends. I was like, no, I need to stay with my friends. He broke me off from the group and took me lower down the mountain. And it was like amazing. It was like, I immediately was like, what did you just do? Like I'm cured. Okay, now I can go. He's like, no, you're going down, right? You're going down the mountain. They're going up the mountain. You're going down the mountain. And I was like, no, right? So, unfortunately, the start of my Everest trek was um, quite disappointing, but not so much so because he ended up taking me to his cousin's little shack. And the cousin, married couple with three young boys. And he probably said something along the lines of like, can you just babysit this tourist until I come back for her? Um, so they didn't speak English. I didn't speak Nepalese, and he left me there. And I became their sort of like adopted daughter. And like I was always kind of looking around to see where I could help out. So I would like sweep. And I always saw the mom making the same thing every day. And she would be stirring, right? She'd be stirring. So I'm like, oh, I can stir. So I'd help her. I'd stir. And it was potato mush, by the way, and that's what we ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Potato mush, and there was also yak milk tea. So I helped make yak milk tea. Delicious, by the way. If you ever have the opportunity to have yak milk tea, I highly recommend. And so I would sweep. I would stir potato mush. I would help make hot yak milk tea. And then another thing I did was I would tutor the three young boys in English. They would teach me Nepalese and I would teach them English. And we had set up a little table outside. And it was just a walkway, right? It was a walkway past their doorway. And tons of people would traverse by. It was mostly like Tibetan nuns, as they were just, they were traversing. And more often than not, they would just sit there and they would just like look curiously at us. And we had quite the gathering every day. Can you imagine? Like, so there was like kind of like this. So there's a walkway, and I set up a table, and then along the walkway, there's sort of like rocks. And so the Tibetan nuns would sit there on the rocks and just peer at us, maybe like wondering what's going on, maybe kind of listening in, what's happening. And so I told the three boys, I said, let's make our own restaurant, right? And so I taught them like what a menu is. And so we created a menu and we wrote right on the menu, 3 things on the menu. Potato mush, a yak milk tea, or nothing. 3 things.
Well, I have a feeling that was your last major mountain adventure.
Uh,
Or is that true?
no, you're right.
Well, it didn't stop you from the marathons, either the actual running marathons and ultra marathons or the marathon you've been going through for the rest of your career. So we kind of jumped over the whole work that you've been doing in the sector, but there's been a lot of it. And
it's been a joy.
So now it's American Red Cross, right? And National Kidney and Classy, Fundraise Up, et cetera, but working with lots and lots of organizations.
Yeah.
Including a lot of work with AFP.
Oh, yes. I love AFP.
Well, and so when I talked to you the other day, of course, it was in the middle of an AFP conference. So you're very involved in bringing all this stuff together.
That was so funny, by the way. That was so funny. Here I am on a Zoom call with you, and you're watching Mike Geiger and Bridget and Nathan Chappelle speak at our AFP Aloha Chapter National Philanthropy Day. And it was so funny because you're like, oh my my gosh, those are my friends. What are they doing in Hawaii? I was like, well, they're here for the conference, right?
Why wouldn't they want to be there is my question. So you've been involved with AFP for a long time now, right? I mean, okay. So what's for you the most important part of that work now?
Yeah, I tell this same story all the time. So when I had fallen into fundraising, the first thing that I did when I became executive director of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I had never had a job like this before, and I was like, do people go to school to become executive directors? Right? You're shaking your head. Well, back then, no. Fast forward to now, and there's actually, right, it is quite impressive that you could actually go to the Lilly School and get, a degree in philanthropy. Well, back then, like, for the most part, many of us fell into fundraising or fell into our nonprofit positions by accident. That was certainly true for me. I fell into it by accident. And I really, I searched for a way to be better at my craft. And so I kind of asked around, is there, are classes I can take? And they said, oh, maybe check the community college. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember that one time I went to the community college, just like the story I told you, right? When I went back for an early education degree, I was like, there must be something. And so the community college, I went to the registrar's office and I said, I think you have a nonprofit management certificate. Can I sign up for that? And they said, where did you see that? I was like, well, it was in the pamphlet. And they're like, let me see that. They're like, this is from like 3 years ago. We don't offer that course anymore. Nobody signed up for it. So it was like a total failure. Like, nobody signed up. Nobody paid for it. So we dropped that class. I was like, no, you're kidding me. Like, I will sign up for it. They're like, you really can't build a program around one student. Sorry. That's not how it works. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, right? So I really didn't know like where to go to learn about being an executive director of a nonprofit organization. And one day I had seen an announcement, and it was for something called NPD. I didn't know what NPD was. Now I do. Now I know what NPD stands for, National Philanthropy Day. But at the time I was like, what is this? But it looks good. It's an all-day conference about nonprofits, about fundraising. I was like, that's what I need, right? And so I went and I was amazed. My jaw probably hit the ground, right? Wow, there are like 300 people in this hotel ballroom, and they all do nonprofit fundraising or nonprofit work. This is fantastic. These are my people. That was where I absolutely, I fell in love with AFP at my very first NPD conference. And that love has never stopped. And NPD has been very special to me because of that origin story. Well, so met all these amazing people who surrounded me with support and education and training. And one person I met there became my mentor. Her name is Sanai Tokumura. Sanai, I did not know this, but Sanai is one of the very few CFRE in the world. What an amazing honor and what an amazing way that she has dedicated her career to be an advanced CFRE, a fundraiser in our sector. She became my mentor. I met her at that first AFP NPD. And she was always there to help me answer my questions, support me, and had also recommended that I join this thing called AFP. What's AFP? I don't know. It's an acronym for Association of Fundraising Professionals. I had no idea. And so she had encouraged me to sign up for membership. Well, I looked at the price tag and I was like, ooh, that's quite expensive, right? And this is something that we still talk about to this day, right? AFP membership is expensive, and we have to think of ways to make AFP membership more accessible and more inclusive, and equitable to all fundraisers, because there are still fundraisers in our sector that do not know about AFP, cannot afford AFP, and need that support and that training. So that there's still work to be done there. And that's no secret, right? We discuss this in every chapter. I still belong to the board. I belong to 2 boards, because I'm still so dedicated to AFP and the work that we do. I belong to the AFP South Sound chapter, and I belong to the AFP Advancement Northwest chapter. So 2 boards, and we have these discussions all the time. So when I met Sanai and she encouraged me to join as a member for AFP, and I had that sticker shock, she said, well, how about this idea? What if you ask your employer, your boss, your supervisor to support you, because it will help. It will definitely help you in your profession. It will help you become a better fundraiser. Made sense to me, right? Unfortunately, as we also know in the nonprofit sector, what is one of the most common sort of objections to supporting our own staff in their professional development? No budget. Sorry, Jennifer, but we just do not have budget for that. What a disappointment. And so again, to this day, we still have work to do, right? Because I faced that objection when I had brought it up to my employer at the time. And so I had told Sanai, and Sanai is also, not only is she an amazing fundraiser, but she's also a very tenacious and caring person. And she said, well, I have something to say about that. So she marched herself. Well, she drove over to my office, got out of the car, came in through the doors, marched herself up the stairs and into the office of my supervisor, and sat herself down, closed the door, and had a talk with my boss. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Number one, why would anybody even do that for me, right? Why would someone stick their neck out for me like that? Number two, like, I'm mortified. Like, my boss just told me no. Like, what makes you think that you can change your mind? Well, when that door opened back up, Sanai smiled at me and she said, congratulations, you are now a paid member of the AFP. Sanai Tokumura, thank you. Thank you so much. But she was the reason I became an AFP member for the first time, because she was willing to stick her neck out for me as my mentor, but also as a caring individual and a very dedicated person to the profession, so that I could have my membership covered by my employer. That really made an impression on me. And she has been an amazing mentor to me and so many fundraisers in our profession. But it also kind of like fits in with that story. It's like, you know, when you have that debt that you feel that you can't repay. Sanai did not do that because she expected something in return. But I knew from that moment on, I was like, this is what it is to to give without expectation of receiving anything in return. This is what it means to pay it forward. This is what it means to be in the nonprofit sector, to make good things happen for a better world. And it happens one kindness at a time, one kindness at a time. And that was a kindness afforded to me. And so I continue to dedicate what I do to AFP for that reason. And it means a lot. AFP does provide training. AFP does provide those connections. AFP does provide the support. AFP does cost a lot too. So we need all this support and training and connections and these relationships. But we also need to continue to work to make it accessible and equitable for everybody. And that's why I love AFP so much.
The Philanthropy Masterminds podcast is underwritten by DonorSearch, the world leader in donor intelligence solutions. Our producer is Jack Frost. Our theme music is Be My Remedy, composed and performed by House of Say. You can subscribe to the Philanthropy Masterminds podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find blogs, webcasts, and CFRE accredited webinars with our featured masterminds at DonorSearch.net or check the show notes and descriptions.